In 1978, a maintenance worker cleaning out a decommissioned government bunker in Virginia found a single metal canister labeled only Real 07 D-Light. Inside was a 16mm film, 12 feet long, perfectly preserved despite decades underground. 3 days after watching it, the worker vanished. His name was never released to the public. The year was 1962. The air in America was electric with fear and invention. In the newspapers, there were rockets and spies, presidents and promises. But behind the headlines, beneath the patriot speeches and the televised smiles, there were laboratories, quiet, windowless rooms where imagination had no moral ceiling. The Cold War was not fought only with missiles. It was fought inside the human mind. That was the decade when the government believed that consciousness itself could be mapped, influenced, even weaponized. There were whispers about sound experiments in Maryland, hypnosis in New Mexico, chemical trials in the Nevada desert. Most of it never reached the public record. But one project, hidden inside a cluster of medical grants, would outlive them all. Its code name was Project Dreamlight. Officially, Dreamlight was a study on sleep therapy for veterans suffering from recurring nightmares. In reality, it was a neurological experiment with a single impossible goal: to record a dream as moving images on film. To pull the invisible out of the human head and pin it to a reel of celluloid. The facility stood outside Boston, in a forest where the power lines ended, and the air smelled of wet pine. From the road it looked harmless, a 3-story brick clinic with white curtains and a flagpole in front. But underground, carved into rock and reinforced with steel, was the laboratory. 3 levels deep, accessible only by a locked elevator and a card stamped with a red letter D. No one except the staff and a handful of government observers ever saw what was inside. Dr. Jonathan Hayward was the man in charge. He was in his mid-40s, tall, careful, dressed always in the same gray suit. At MIT, he had been known as the dream anatomist, a neuroscientist who claimed that sleep was not rest, but translation. He believed that when the eyes move beneath the lids, they are not wandering at random. They are scanning something real, something projected onto the inner surface of the brain. If that projection emitted even a trace of electromagnetic energy, he thought, then light-sensitive film could capture it. Hayward called his method neuro-optical transcription. He said it would change both medicine and cinema, a bridge between biology and art. But his earlier tests, performed on animals, had been shut down by ethics boards. Dreamlight gave him freedom again. No oversight, no questions, only results. The laboratory was a theater of hums and wires. Steel tables stood beneath fluorescent tubes that never flickered. The smell of antiseptic and ozone mixed with coffee and real grease. At the center of the room stood the machine itself, the Dreamlight apparatus A1. It looked like something between a dentist's chair and a radio tower. A reclining seat surrounded by lenses, copper coils, and a tangle of fiber cables leading into a humming box the size of a piano. When powered, the lenses glowed faintly blue, pulsing with the rhythm of a heartbeat. 6 subjects were chosen. 3 men, 3 women, all volunteers, though their signatures were taken under heavy sedation. Each suffered from persistent nightmares. Soldiers, nurses, factory workers, people whose nights were as violent as their days. They were promised therapy, relief, and a small pension for their participation. None of them would ever be recorded leaving the facility. The first trial began on a rainy Monday in July. The patient, catalogued as Subject 01, was a veteran from Korea. Electrodes were attached to his temples. The helmet lowered gently over his head. A reel of Eastman's 16mm film was loaded into the capture unit. At exactly 2 a.m., the lights dimmed, and the room fell into a soft mechanical heartbeat. The whir of film, the ticking of the EKG, the hiss of air conditioning. The man fell asleep in 17 minutes. For the first hour, the film registered only noise, static bursts of gray light, irregular patterns, nothing more. But near dawn, the waveform began to change. Jagged spikes, rhythmic pulses, a pattern that looked less like chaos and more like language. When the reel was developed the next morning, it contained 780 frames of abstract color: blue, red, white, swirling in slow, breathing motion. Hayward stared at the film under the projector's beam and whispered, "It's alive." Over the next week, 5 more sessions were recorded. Each reel grew more complex. Shapes became figures. Blurs became recognizable landscapes, doorways, windows, faces half-formed by light. By the 4th night, one frame showed a woman standing in a field, her hair moving though there was no wind. Hayward wrote in his notebook, "The dream is remembering itself." Outside the lab, the world went on untouched. Boston traffic, radio, summer heat. But inside, dreamlight time thickened. No one spoke loudly. They began to work in 12-hour rotations, sleeping on folding cots, afraid to miss what the machine might capture next. They stopped opening the windows. They stopped marking the calendar. When a nurse complained that the hallway clocks were running backward, Hayward ordered them removed. Each subject was showing increased agitation. Their sleep became longer, deeper, almost impossible to interrupt. When awakened, they spoke of light behind their eyes, of seeing themselves watched from a distance. One man said, "There's someone in the dark part of the room. He's filming us." The doctors laughed at first, until they reviewed his reel and saw a moving shadow that did not match any of the people present. By the 5th night, Hayward decided to focus all resources on a single participant, a 29-year-old nurse named Helen Myers. She was intelligent, calm and brave enough to volunteer again despite migraines and trembling hands. Her recurring dream was simple. She walked down a corridor of white doors. At the end waited a man she could never quite see. Every time she reached for the final doorknob, she woke screaming. At 1:47 a.m., the apparatus began recording Helen's dream. The data output spiked instantly, 10 times stronger than any previous session. Through the glass window of the control room, the team watched the reels spin faster and faster. Inside her dream, light began to take shape. Corridors, doors. The image stabilized, sharpened, and then, impossibly, focused on her own sleeping body. It was as if the camera inside her mind had turned around. The projection showed a second figure standing behind her bed. A man, tall, shoulder-squared, holding something metallic in his hands. Frame by frame, it became clear. He was holding a camera, an old 16mm model, identical to the one Hayward used for documentation. Only it was inside the dream. The scientists argued about reflections, about optical bleed, about interference between channels. But no theory explained why the shadow's lens glinted at the same moment that Hayward's own projector bulb flickered. When Helen awoke an hour later, her pulse was steady but her eyes remained open, unblinking. She whispered a sentence again and again. "He's still there. He doesn't leave when I wake up." Hayward ended the session and sealed the reel in a lead canister labeled 07. He ordered all data archived and prohibited any duplication. But the technicians had already begun developing the footage, unable to resist curiosity. One of them, a young assistant named Mark Ellison, projected the film in a small viewing room. Halfway through, the bulb exploded. When the lights returned, Ellison was gone. Only his headset remained on the floor, cord still warm. The official report blamed electrical failure and exhaustion. Unofficially, the staff began quitting. 2 nurses resigned within a day. The janitor refused to enter the lower levels. Hayward replaced them with silent interns from Washington who never gave their names. He worked alone most nights, documenting every anomaly. He described how film reels stored in the vault sometimes unspooled by themselves, frames melting into translucent white. How the sound recorders, though disconnected, replayed faint breathing when no one was present. He noted a persistent frequency at 32 Hz that grew louder each session, as if the building itself were vibrating. By mid-August, the Dreamlight project had recorded over 200 hours of visual data. The footage became less coherent. The subjects stopped dreaming ordinary scenes and began producing geometric storms of light, flashing sigils, spirals, and the silhouette of a man that appeared in every reel. The same height, the same posture. Always holding a camera, Hayward's journal for August 14th reads, Subject 06 displayed full visual reciprocity. The image looked back. The reflection smiled. That night, the security footage shows Hayward pacing the hallway, muttering equations. He pulls the fire alarm twice, then disables it. He tapes black paper over the observation windows. At 3:11 a.m., he unlocks the vault and removes Reel 07. The next recorded entry of him alive is a note scrawled on a clipboard. Film is still recording without source. Do not watch. Do not rewind. The reel continued spinning for 6 hours before the generator finally failed. When technicians entered the lab the following morning, they found the machine humming through the power had been cut. The lenses were fogged from heat. On the wall, projected in weak white light, was a frozen frame. The interior of the same room, but empty, as if filmed from someone standing exactly where they were. They shut everything down. They packed the reels into numbered canisters, sealed them in crates, and loaded them onto a government truck bound for Washington. The paperwork called it Equipment Disposal Number 27. Within a week, the building was condemned for structural damage. Within a month, it no longer existed on any map, but some records escaped. A single photograph of the team smiling beside the apparatus. A shipping invoice stamped Confidential, D-Light, and a memo signed in black ink. Experiment suspended until visual containment is possible. When investigators reviewed the ashes of the Northfield facility, they found almost nothing that could be called evidence. Most of the lab had liquefied in the heat. Steel beams curled like ribbon. The vault collapsed inward, its hinges fused into a single black knot. Only one object survived, a fragment of a label half melted but still legible. It read, Reel 07, D-Light. The discovery reignited whispers that the Dreamlight experiment had not died in the fire. Some believed the footage had already been copied. Others claimed that Hayward had smuggled a reel out before the flames reached the archive. The government denied everything, of course. Yet 3 months later, a classified memo surfaced within the Defense Communications Bureau. Stamped in red, recovered media, do not project. Beneath the warning was a list of names, 6 of them crossed out. Only one remained unmarked, Helen Myers. Helen Myers had survived, and she was no longer the same woman who entered that lab. After the fire, she was transferred to a federal hospital outside Providence, Rhode Island. Doctors described her condition as lucid but detached, a polite phrase for a mind split down the middle. She spoke clearly, responded to her name, even smiled, but her eyes never seemed to focus on the person in front of her. It was as if she were always listening to something behind the conversation, a voice only she could hear. Hospital notes show that she slept less than 2 hours each night. When she did fall asleep, monitors recorded violent REM activity, erratic pulses, temperature spikes, and occasional electric interference strong enough to distort nearby radios. Nurses learned not to touch her during these episodes. The moment anyone approached, the equipment in the room began to hum. One nurse compared the sound to a film reel spinning inside the walls. Dr. Raymond Keene, a neurologist assigned to her case, documented an incident on October 9, 1962. At 3:14 a.m., Helen sat upright in her bed and began to speak in a calm, measured tone. She said, "He found another way in." Through the light, her pulse doubled. The overhead bulb flickered. Keene tried to comfort her, but she turned her head toward the security camera and whispered, "Don't film this." The feed cut out for 7 seconds. When the picture returned, Helen was asleep, smiling faintly. The audio recorded nothing except the whir of magnetic tape reversing direction by itself. 3 days later, the hospital basement flooded from a burst pipe. Maintenance crews clearing the damage reported seeing a man in a white coat holding a handheld camera, standing in the corridor waist-deep in water. When they shouted, he vanished. Security footage confirmed the water, but no man. Still, the rumor spread. The staff began calling him the cameraman. Dr. Keene, perhaps out of professional arrogance, decided to confront the myth scientifically. He retrieved what remained of Hayward's research: boxes of burnt notes, half-legible diagrams, and several melted film canisters. Among them was a strip of undeveloped 16mm stock fused to metal. When he held it up to the light, faint silhouettes appeared between the scorched frames, shapes that looked almost human. He sent the fragment to a government lab for analysis. 2 weeks later, the package was returned unopened, with a typed message inside. "Do not pursue." but Keene was already obsessed. He wrote in his private diary, "If the Dreamlight process linked image and consciousness, Helen may now exist in a constant state of dual exposure, one foot in the waking world, one still trapped on film." He requested permission to conduct controlled sleep studies. The request was denied. So he continued in secret. He set up a small monitoring room in the hospital's disused East Wing, a forgotten ward with flaking paint and humming fluorescent lights. There he installed an old projector, modified EEG equipment, and a reel of unused film stock scavenged from the storage room. On the night of November 2nd, he convinced Helen to participate, promising that it would help quiet the noise in her head. She agreed. Perhaps she wanted proof as much as he did. At 11:47 p.m., Keene attached the sensors and lowered the projector light to its dimmest setting. Helen's eyes fluttered. Her breathing slowed. Within minutes, the monitors began to spike. The air smelled faintly of ozone, the same sterile tang described in Hayward's notes. Keene wrote a single sentence before the pen slipped from his hand. Signal initiated. What happened next exists only in fragments of testimony and damaged tape. At 2:10 a.m., the nurse's station registered a power surge localized entirely within the East Wing. All circuit breakers tripped except the one connected to Keene's room. Security responded 5 minutes later. When they forced the door open, they found the projector still running, throwing bright white light onto the far wall. The reel spun endlessly, the film already finished, its tail slapping rhythmically against the housing. Helen sat upright in the chair, eyes open, motionless. Dr. Keene lay on the floor beside her. Alive but unresponsive, his pupils dilated, his heartbeat steady but slow. The projector screen showed a grainy image, not the room they stood in, but another version of it, darker, older, with soot on the walls. In the center of that ghostly room stood a man holding a camera. He raised it slowly, and for a single frame, the lens reflected the flashlight of the guard who had entered. Then the film burned through. Helen was transferred again, this time under federal supervision. Dr. Keene never recovered. He spoke only once afterward, muttering 3 words before lapsing into permanent silence. He was behind. For the next 2 decades, Helen drifted through various institutions. Her file passed between agencies like a curse no one wanted to keep. Psychiatrists labeled her delusional, yet every one of them reported the same unsettling pattern: electrical disturbances in rooms where she slept. Fluorescent bulbs flickered. Film cameras jammed. Tape recorders reversed mid-sentence. One psychologist noted that when he attempted to take her photograph for documentation, the camera produced a blank frame covered in fine scratches, resembling the letters D and L by 1978. Most of the original Dreamlight personnel were dead or missing. The project had faded into rumor. But that year, an event occurred that would drag its name back into the light. A maintenance worker named Thomas Green was assigned to clear an abandoned government storage bunker in rural Virginia, property once managed by the same Psychological Defense Branch. Among stacks of rusted filing cabinets, he found a metal container labeled Reel 07 D-Light. Inside was a 16mm film reel, perfectly preserved, its leader uncut. Green brought it home, assuming it was military footage. He owned an old projector inherited from his father and decided to watch it. His neighbor later reported hearing the machine running around midnight, followed by silence. 3 days later, Green was gone. His house showed no sign of struggle. The projector sat in the living room, still plugged in, the reel completely rewound. The local sheriff logged the evidence but never viewed the film. It was shipped to Washington, then to an undisclosed archive. Only one technician, a man named Alan Rowe, was authorized to develop a test strip for verification. Rowe's subsequent memo survives in declassified fragments. 2 overlapping exposures detected. Primary layer depicts hospital corridor consistent with Northfield footage. Secondary layer depicts same corridor from reversed perspective. Subject visible in both. Impossible optical geometry. Rowe requested reassignment the next day. He left government service within a month and never spoke publicly again. When reporters attempted to locate Helen Myers in the early 80s, they were told she had died of respiratory failure. No death certificate exists. Her last confirmed appearance was at a private care facility in New Hampshire. 1979. A nurse there kept a journal describing strange electrical humming that filled Helen's room after lights out. On March 12th, the nurse wrote, "Patient whispers during sleep. He is still recording." The following morning, the woman resigned. After that, Helen vanished from all records. Some believe she finally died, her body buried under another name. Others think she was taken back into federal custody. But there are people who claim to have met her, or at least someone who looked exactly like her, years later. Always the same details: pale skin, unfocused eyes, and an old 16mm camera strap wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet. In 1995, a documentary filmmaker named Paul Hendricks began producing a series about Cold War psychological experiments. While interviewing a retired intelligence officer, he was handed a sealed envelope. Inside was a contact sheet of black and white photographs labeled Dreamlight Personnel. One image stood out: a woman seated under a bank of laboratory lights, staring past the photographer. Her eyes reflected a tiny white circle, the flashbulb, perfectly round, perfectly centered. Hendricks scanned the photo onto his computer. Moments later, the image distorted, lines rippling outward like waves. The file corrupted itself before his eyes. He deleted it, emptied the recycle bin, and shut down the machine. When he turned off the lights, his computer monitor flickered once, projecting the same woman's face, inverted, smiling faintly in the dark. That photograph would later circulate online, attached to message board threads titled "The Dreamlight Tape" and "The Woman Who Dreams of the Cameraman." Most users dismissed it as an urban legend. But a handful of viewers claimed that saving the image to their phones caused the screens to glitch permanently, producing a faint static hum whenever the brightness rose above 60%. No one has ever proven a connection. Yet the rumor persists. The truth, if there is one, remains locked somewhere between those burned frames and the living memory of Helen Myers. What she saw inside her dream, and what followed her out of it, may never be understood. But every attempt to erase her story has only made it louder. Each rediscovered photograph, each reappearing reel, each unexplained surge of static carries her echo forward, as though the dream itself refuses to end, somewhere, on nights when the air is thick and the electricity hums just above hearing. People still claim to catch a flicker in the corner of their vision, a flash like an old camera bulb. They say that if you close your eyes afterward, you can see her standing there, perfectly still, watching. And just before you wake, she raises the camera to her eye. Then the film begins to turn. By the summer of 1963, Project Dreamlight had become a rumor that refused to die. The newspapers called it the Boston Fire Case, a tragic laboratory accident that destroyed a government building and 12 lives. But inside a few locked offices in Washington, the story was far from closed. Too many files were missing. Too many witnesses had disappeared. And somewhere in the ruins of the Northfield facility, something still glowed in the dark. Officially, the fire was blamed on an overloaded generator. The report was 4 pages long, unsigned and sealed within days. But the photographs taken by the first responders told another story. In those grainy black and white prints, the flames seemed to move against the wind. Light traced unnatural paths across the debris, as if guided by an unseen hand. The investigators noted faint burn patterns on the concrete floor, concentric circles, each roughly the size of a film reel. In June, the site was declared unsafe and fenced off. Yet at night, locals saw flashes through the cracks in the foundation, like a projector hidden underground. No one dared to go closer. Only one man did, a government contractor named Leonard Bates, assigned to catalog the wreckage before demolition. Bates was methodical, sober and utterly without imagination, the kind of man bureaucracy trusted. On July 14th, he descended into the lower level with a flashlight and a clipboard. What he found was less a laboratory than a tomb. Tables fused into the floor. Wires hung from the ceiling like vines. The air reeked of ozone and burned plastic. In one corner, half buried in ash, he uncovered a fragment of metal engraved with the letters DLIGHT. Next to it lay a melted film canister, its lid sealed tight. He logged the find, carried the canister to his truck, and drove away. That night, his wife reported that he never came home. The truck was found abandoned beside a quarry 30 miles away. Inside, the passenger seat was covered in fine gray dust. The canister was gone. The disappearance of Leonard Bates became the first of many quiet erasures linked to the Dreamlight file. Anyone who touched the evidence seemed to vanish, or lose interest, or simply stop talking. By autumn, even the fire department's archive photographs had been misplaced. The case number was reassigned to a housing project. Northfield became a blank space in official memory. But the legend of the fire spread like smoke through the academic world. Students whispered that the experiment had opened a door into the subconscious. Professors warned against studying it, saying that the human mind was never meant to look directly at itself. A few dared to search for surviving footage. One of them was Dr. Evelyn Ross, a young physicist at Columbia University who specialized in light interference. She had heard rumors of a lost reel stored somewhere in a federal warehouse. Her curiosity would ignite the Dreamlight myth for a second time. In February 1964, Ross received an unmarked parcel containing 3 undeveloped frames of 16mm film. No return address. She examined them under a microscope. Each frame showed the same corridor, the Northfield hallway, from slightly different angles. But something moved between the shots. A man in a white coat, holding a camera.
She enlarged the image until the grain broke apart, and there, embedded in the shadow of the lens, she saw a reflection of another figure.
A woman, her eyes closed, her mouth half open as if speaking. Ross recognized her from newspaper clippings. It was Helen Myers. The discovery terrified her. She burned the frames, but not before making a single photograph for her notes. That photograph survives today. A blurred image of a corridor lit by fire, with 2 silhouettes facing each other across the smoke. Forensic analysts later confirmed that the light source in the picture was not fire at all, but an overexposed projection beam. Whether Ross's sample came from the missing reel 7 or from another copy will never be known. But her story reignited official interest. Within weeks, the government reopened the Northfield investigation under a new name, Operation Containment. Agents revisited the ruins armed with Geiger counters and magnetometers. They found no radiation, no chemicals, nothing measurable, only an electromagnetic anomaly pulsing every 11 seconds from beneath the ground. The frequency matched the heartbeat rhythm recorded in Hayward's early experiments. When they drilled into the foundation to locate the source, the signal stopped abruptly, as if aware of being watched. The following night, the site caught fire again. No one was hurt. The blaze lasted less than an hour, but the flames behaved exactly like the first inferno, curling inward instead of outward. Witnesses described seeing shapes in the smoke, people walking inside the fire. A journalist who photographed the event claimed that the negatives developed as clear film, empty except for faint white scratches spelling the letters D and L. After the second fire, all remaining debris was removed and buried at an undisclosed location. The ground was leveled, the coordinates erased. But the anomaly did not disappear. Power outages began to affect nearby towns. Television screens flickered with static that spelled words when slowed down frame by frame. One local station in Maine reported that during an early morning broadcast, their camera feed cut to a still image of a woman's face, pale, blurred, eyes wide open. The signal lasted exactly 7 seconds, then returned to normal. The FCC blamed atmospheric interference. No recording survived. For years afterward, the Dreamlight fire existed only as myth, a cautionary tale whispered among technicians and archivists. But in 1978, the same year Thomas Green disappeared with the canister in Virginia, someone sent a letter to the Boston Globe. It was unsigned, typed on yellow paper, and postmarked from Chicago. The letter contained a single sentence. The fire was not an ending. It was an exposure. The editors dismissed it as a hoax. But decades later, when the archives were digitized, the scanned page produced an error. Across the top margin, faintly visible under ultraviolet light, were the words, Project Dreamlight, active reel status unknown. Some researchers believe that the Northfield blaze was not a conventional fire at all. They suggest it was a phenomenon of light inversion, an uncontrolled manifestation of the same process Hayward tried to harness. In simpler terms, the dream recorded itself outward, burning through film, walls, and flesh, until nothing remained but image. An internal memo dated September 1963 supports this theory. It reads, "Residual luminescence continues at the site despite removal of all flammable material. Recommend total blackout and sealing of perimeter." The memo ends with a line blacked out by sensors, followed by one surviving phrase, "The lens remains open," if that document is genuine. It implies that the experiment did not fail, it succeeded too well. Hayward's machine captured more than a dream. It created a permanent recording loop between the conscious and the physical. When the lab burned, the loop had no medium left but the environment itself. The fire became film, reality, projection. What happened to Hayward remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of Cold War science. Officially, his body was never recovered. Unofficially, there are conflicting accounts. One claims he was seen months later in Maryland, standing outside a government cinema wearing the same gray suit he always wore. Another story places him in New York, staring through the window of a camera shop until closing time. No photographs exist, only descriptions that agree on one detail, the reflection of a lens hanging from his hand. In 1982, a retired firefighter named Frank Daly gave an interview to a local radio station. He was 80 years old, nearly blind, but his memory of that night was perfect. He said, "We sprayed the water and it just vanished. The flames didn't burn like normal. They folded, like they were being sucked back into the building. And when it was over, the walls were clean, too clean." He paused before adding, "I saw a man in the middle of it all. He was holding a camera, filming everything. The heat didn't touch him." Daly died 2 weeks later. His final words to his daughter were, "Tell them he's still filming." Modern analysts dismiss Daly's account as hallucination brought on by smoke inhalation. But there is one undeniable fact. The film reels, recovered from later government cleanups, show identical heat warping patterns, as if they had been exposed to light from within rather than without. Historians who study Dreamlight agree that the night of the fire marked the point where evidence and myth fused permanently. Every surviving record from that moment carries contradictions. Dates don't match. Timestamps reverse order. A single reel, catalogued as salvaged from debris, appears in 3 different inventories at once. One in Washington, one in Prague, one in an unknown private collection. When researchers attempted to synchronize the reels, something stranger occurred. Each version contained identical footage of the fire, but the perspective changed slightly. In one, the camera looked down from the balcony. In another, it filmed from ground level. In the third, it faced outward, as if from inside the blaze. Frame by frame, the same figure appeared. The man with the camera, framed by swirling light, never blinking. In the final frame, he raises his hand and points directly at the viewer. Then the reel ends in silence. For decades, archivists have debated whether these sequences are genuine or fabricated. Some insist they were later recreations by conspiracy theorists. Others, after examining the grain and aging of the film, conclude that the material is authentic to the 1960s. One technician who handled the reels said that when projected, the light seemed to thicken, like walking through water. He refused to touch them again. Today, nothing remains of the Northfield site. A housing development covers the land, its neat lawns and driveways hiding what once burned beneath. Yet residents report electrical faults that no engineer can explain. Lights that flicker simultaneously across the entire street. Televisions that hum softly, even when unplugged. Children say they dream of corridors filled with smoke and of a man standing quietly at the end, filming. Their drawings, when collected by a local teacher, all show the same thing. A circle of light and 2 letters written underneath. DL. What began as a scientific experiment ended as a ghost story. But those who have studied the Dreamlight papers believe it is more than legend. They say the fire was an act of containment, a desperate attempt to destroy a recording that refused to stop playing. And if that is true, then the question remains, where is the projector now? Some claim it still hums beneath the ground, buried but active, its lens pointed upward toward the world above. Every 11 seconds, it releases a pulse of invisible light, a heartbeat of the dream that once tried to film itself alive. For almost 15 years, Project Dreamlight existed only in the whispered corridors of government buildings and the half-forgotten nightmares of those who had seen its light. The official files were locked away, stamped, classified indefinitely. The site in Boston was buried, paved, and renamed. Yet despite the silence, the story kept resurfacing, in rumors, in archive inventories, in photographs that shouldn't exist. And at the center of every retelling was the same missing object, Real 07. By 1978, the Cold War had entered its second generation. Technology had changed. Computers replaced film in most laboratories, and the Dreamlight project had been reduced to a cautionary legend. But in the world of collectors, lost reels had value, especially those rumored to hold forbidden footage. One such collector was Thomas Green, a maintenance worker from Virginia who spent weekends exploring abandoned military bunkers. He loved old cameras, projector bulbs, and anything stamped property of U.S. government. He never imagined that one of those objects would erase him from history. Green's discovery began with a classified storage facility near Shenandoah, long decommissioned, known locally as Site 12. The government had sold it at auction, but no one claimed the underground levels. On a cold January afternoon, Green descended a rusted staircase into the lower chamber. The air smelled of mold and machine oil. Rows of cabinets lined the corridor, filled with reel cans and broken typewriters. Most were empty, except for one. Inside a small drawer, wrapped in wax paper, was a metal film canister. Stamped into its lid were the letters, Real 07 D-Light. The paint was faded but legible. Green thought he had found a Cold War training film, maybe worth a few dollars to a collector. He packed it carefully into his truck and drove home. That night, he set up his father's projector in the living room. His neighbor later reported seeing light flickering through the curtains just after midnight. Then silence. No more movement, no more sound. 3 days later, the house was found unlocked, the projector still humming, the reel neatly rewound. Thomas Green was gone. Police searched every inch of the property. No struggle, no footprints, no fingerprints. Only the faint smell of ozone and a fine layer of dust covering the furniture, as if the house had been empty for years. The canister was missing. The local sheriff filed a brief report and sent the evidence to Washington. It arrived at a classified media storage unit in Langley, where technicians logged it as recovered item D07. There, under strict supervision, the film was finally developed. The man in charge of the process was Alan Rowe, a meticulous archivist with 20 years of service. He had no interest in myths or ghosts. For him, film was chemistry and light, nothing more. He placed the reel in a sealed development bath and waited. Rowe's official report, now partially declassified, describes what happened next. The emulsion layer shows double exposure throughout entire length. Primary layer consistent with Eastman stock circa 1960s. Secondary layer not visible under normal light but emerges under low UV. Both exposures display identical spatial composition inverted at 45 degrees. Suggests two simultaneous recordings from mirrored perspectives. In other words, the reel contained two overlapping images, the same corridor filmed from both sides at once. Impossible unless the film itself had captured both observer and observed. At the midpoint of the reel, Rowe noted something stranger. The image began to pulse in perfect rhythm with the fluorescent lights of the room. He turned off the power. The pulsing continued. He described hearing a faint mechanical whir, like a camera winding in the dark. Then, for a brief second, he saw movement on the reel before the projector had even been threaded. A shadow crossed the film strip itself, frame by frame, as if something behind him was already watching. He switched on the lights. The noise stopped. Rowe sealed the reel, signed the report, and requested reassignment. He resigned a week later and left government service entirely. He never spoke publicly about what he saw, but he left a note in his desk drawer, found years later by another archivist. If you stare long enough, it looks back. After Rowe's resignation, the reel vanished from the archive. Its log entry remained, but the physical canister was gone. 2 security officers claimed to have loaded it into a locked vault, yet no one could produce the key. For a decade, Reels '07 existed only as a rumor in photocopied memos, until one appeared again, this time in Europe. In 1986, a Czech journalist named Lukas Novak received an anonymous package containing a 16mm reel and a single sentence typed on thin paper. Found in the ashes of Boston, developed in darkness. Novak screened the film privately in a small studio in Prague. He described what he saw in an unpublished manuscript found after his death. The reel begins with a corridor. Flickering lights, a woman standing at the far end, perhaps the same one from the American reports. She speaks, but the film is silent. Then, a figure appears behind her holding a camera. The angle shifts. For one instant, I see both of them, the woman and the man, filming each other. The camera turns toward me. The frame fills with white. 2 weeks later, Novak was found dead in his apartment. Cause of death, electrical heart failure. His projector bulb had melted into the socket. The reel was missing. When his notes reached Western media, they reignited global interest in Project Dreamlight. Documentary filmmakers, conspiracy theorists, and artists began searching for the lost reel. Some claimed to have fragments, burnt frames showing the woman's eyes, or a hand reaching through light. Others accused the government of fabricating the story to cover chemical weapons tests. But among the noise, one pattern remained consistent. Every copy, every sighting, every recording of Reel '07 ended with the same impossible image, a man with a camera raising it toward the viewer. In 1992, a television producer named Margaret O'Connor pitched a series called Forgotten Science: America's Secret Experiments. The pilot episode focused on Dreamlight. During editing, technicians reported static interference on the master tape, a faint rhythmic hum that grew louder each time they tried to erase it. When slowed down, the waveform revealed alternating peaks at intervals of exactly 11 seconds, the same frequency recorded at the Northfield site 30 years earlier. The studio destroyed the footage and canceled the project. Yet copies of the unfinished episode circulated among collectors. Some versions contained extra frames not present in the original broadcast, flashes of corridors, hands adjusting camera lenses, and once, a single still of a woman's face, eyes open, staring through the grain. O'Connor denied ever filming those shots. She left the industry soon after and disappeared from public life. By the turn of the century, Dreamlight had become an online legend. Forums traded low-resolution screenshots and corrupted files said to be from the lost reel. Most were hoaxes, edited clips, staged recreations, digital distortions. But one video, uploaded in 2003 under the title DL7 Fragment, caught experts' attention. It showed 6 seconds of flickering footage, a hallway filmed in monochrome, light leaking through the edges. At the 2-second mark, a faint human silhouette appeared on the right side of the frame. Then the image reversed, the same scene mirrored backward, the silhouette now on the opposite side. At the end, both figures overlapped and dissolved into static. The file metadata contained no encoding information, no creation date, no codec. Just one line of text. Reel '07, active. Digital analysts from several universities examined the file. They found anomalies impossible to replicate. Frame-by-frame variations suggesting the video had been recorded on analog film, not generated digitally. Yet no known scanner could produce that resolution. One expert concluded, it behaves like a recording of light itself responding to observation. In 2010, a private collector claimed to possess the original Reel '07. He contacted a small museum of cinema history in Los Angeles, offering to loan it for display. He never revealed his identity, only signed his emails, DL Curator. The museum agreed to meet. On the day of the appointment, the curator's courier arrived with an empty case. Inside was a single strip of film, 3 frames long. The images were almost invisible, but under magnification. Technicians saw a pair of eyes, and between them, the faint outline of a camera lens. That same week, the museum's surveillance system malfunctioned. The footage from the storage room replayed itself backward for 7 hours straight. When corrected, the timestamp showed a continuous loop of light flickering across the shelves. No person was visible, yet the reflection of the camera could be seen in every glass display. The strip was sealed in a glass container and stored in climate control. Every 6 months, the staff checked it. Each time, the frames had changed slightly. the contrast darker, the eyes sharper, as if the image was developing itself. Today, no one knows where Reel 07 truly is. Some say it was destroyed in a secret archive fire in Maryland in 2012. Others claim it remains in circulation, passed between collectors who never live long enough to show it twice. But a few insist that the reel no longer exists in physical form, that it transferred itself into light, into digital echoes, into dreams. In March 2025, a 3-minute clip surfaced online under the title Dreamlight Transmission. It contained footage unmistakably similar to Novak's description: the corridor, the woman, the cameraman, the mirrored perspective. The final frame displayed a sentence in white letters: "If you dream of him, he will find you." The account that uploaded the video vanished within hours, its IP traced to no registered location. Copies spread across platforms before being deleted by automated systems for corrupted content. Yet some users reported that even after deletion, the video continued to play on their screens, a flicker that would not stop. Historians now refer to Reel 07 as the lost reel. But perhaps the word lost no longer applies. It may have found its own way back, through light, through memory, through the fragile film between dreaming and waking. And if that is true, then it was never truly destroyed. It simply moved from one medium to another. Every legend needs an origin. But some legends never stop recording. The year was 2025. 63 years had passed since Project Dreamlight flickered to life in that hidden laboratory outside Boston. Most of the people connected to it were dead, missing or forgotten. The reel, the rumors, the ashes, all buried beneath history's dust. But some stories refuse to stay quiet. They wait, they hum, they project. It began again, as it always does, with a file. On March 8th, an anonymous user uploaded a short 3-minute video to a private archival forum known as Dark Cell, a place frequented by historians, collectors, and conspiracy researchers. The file was titled Dreamlight Transmission. Its description contained only one line: recovered signal, Reel 07, active sequence, no metadata, no source. The upload timestamp read Yo3:14 a.m. At first, the clip seemed unremarkable, a silent black and white hallway, flickering like an old security feed. But viewers noticed that the footage looped with subtle differences each time. Shadows shifted, objects moved. The grain crawled like living static. And in the fourth loop, a human figure appeared at the edge of the frame. A woman. She stood motionless, facing the camera, her mouth barely open, as if caught mid-breath. On the wall behind her, 2 faint letters glowed, D and L. Within 24 hours, the file spread beyond the forum. Re-uploads appeared on Reddit, YouTube, Telegram, and encrypted chat servers. Each version was slightly shorter than the last. Each carried a new glitch, a new distortion, and, beneath the silence, a faint rhythmic pulse every 11 seconds. Sound engineers identified it as a low-frequency hum consistent with analog film projectors. But digital analysis revealed something impossible. The pulse was not part of the audio track. It was embedded in the video signal itself, oscillating between frames like a heartbeat made of light. The clip became known as the return signal. Those who watched it described an uneasy after effect. Colors dimmed. Screens flickered even when unplugged. Some reported vivid dreams. Always the same corridor, always the same woman, always a man standing behind her, holding a camera. He never moved. He only filmed. Cybersecurity experts tried to trace the upload. The IP address led to a decommissioned military relay in West Virginia, an underground node built during the 1960s for signal redundancy. When investigators arrived, they found the facility powered but empty. No computers, no cables, only an old film projector sitting in the center of the main room. Its power cord was frayed, its bulb burned out. But when they touched the metal frame, it was warm. One technician opened the projector's feed port and found a reel of 16mm film still threaded inside. The label was faded, nearly erased, but a few letters remained. EEL07, Liege. He removed the reel carefully, placed it in an evidence box, and handed it to his supervisor. Within 48 hours, both men resigned without explanation. The evidence box was never logged. The story might have ended there. Another ghost in a digital sea, if not for what happened 2 weeks later. On March 23rd, several major news networks across the United States experienced a synchronized broadcast glitch at exactly 3:14 a.m. Eastern Time. For 7 seconds, every affected channel displayed the same image, a dimly lit hospital corridor. At the end of the hallway stood a woman facing the camera. Then the screen cut to black. When normal transmission resumed, the station logs showed no interruption. The event was dismissed as coincidence, a software fault caused by a satellite relay. But hundreds of viewers recorded the anomaly. Frame analysis confirmed it matched the Dreamlight footage down to the exact pixel structure. In one recording, slowed to quarter speed, an additional frame appeared that none of the others contained. A single line of white text, lasting less than 1/10 of a second. It read, "Project Dreamlight, status active." Theories exploded across the internet. Some said the video was a viral marketing stunt. Others insisted it was proof that the government had revived the experiment using digital technology. But beneath the noise, a few recognized something older, a pattern stretching back to the original fire, to the hum of the reels, to the man who always filmed but never spoke. Experts, attempting to isolate the signal, discovered that the Dreamlight clip contained data hidden within its luminance values, information encoded not as audio or text, but as light intensity. When translated through modern imaging software, the values produced an image sequence, alternating frames of a woman's face and a man's silhouette. Overlaid together, they formed a single figure, half male, half female, both holding the same camera. The timestamp embedded in the file read 11/07/1962-0314. Created somehow, 63 years before the upload. Government agencies quietly seized the servers hosting the original file. Darkcell vanished overnight. The domain name was sold to a health supplement company, but the copies could not be contained. The signal had already been downloaded, mirrored, archived, shared. Every deletion created 2 new versions, each slightly degraded, but still pulsing with that 11-second rhythm. The file behaved like a living organism, replicating itself through light. Then the dreams began. Thousands of users across the world reported identical experiences. Vivid, looping visions of a corridor that never ended. In each dream, they heard the sound of an old camera winding, slow, mechanical, steady. Some claimed they saw themselves walking through the corridor, filmed from behind. Others saw nothing at all, only a bright circle of light growing closer until they woke, gasping in the dark. Psychologists called it mass suggestion. Neurologists called it pattern-induced hallucination. But no one could explain why electronic devices in the homes of those dreamers began to malfunction. Televisions switching on at 3:14 a.m. Phones recording without input. Laptops projecting faint white frames even when powered off. One online researcher, using the alias LM Archive, compiled thousands of these incidents into a single map. Every report aligned along a pattern forming a straight line from Boston to West Virginia, the same route as the original data cable connecting Northfield Laboratory to the national signal grid. At the midpoint of that line stood an abandoned broadcasting relay station built in 1963 and sealed since the fire. Locals called it the Mirror Tower. On April 2nd, LM Archive and 2 colleagues traveled to the site. Their live stream began at dusk, shaky footage of overgrown fences, cracked concrete, and a rusted satellite dish pointing toward the sky. Inside the main hall, they found nothing but dust and silence. The feed cut in and out as they moved deeper into the structure. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the screen froze. The last clear frame showed a dark corridor stretching into shadow. At the far end, faint light flickered, as if from a projection booth. Then static. The stream ended abruptly and never resumed. 3 days later, their abandoned car was found 5 miles away. All equipment gone. Only one object remained on the dashboard. An undeveloped roll of 16mm film. Authorities recovered the film and developed it. The footage lasted 12 seconds. It showed the interior of the Mirror Tower, empty at first, then filling with pale light. A silhouette entered the frame. A man holding a camera, his features indistinct, the lens glinting once before the reel burned through. The final frame displayed a message scratched directly onto the emulsion. "If you dream of him, he will find you." That message echoed online for months afterward. People began quoting it, printing it, tattooing it. It became a meme, then a mantra, then something else, an invocation. Each time the phrase appeared in a video description or a comment thread, the site hosting it experienced random outages. IT specialists traced the failures to short bursts of unrecognized data flooding from old IP ranges, servers that no longer existed. Yet the pattern repeated exactly every 11 seconds. Digital forensics attempted to rebuild the source. Their simulation showed a repeating binary pulse forming a recognizable shape, the outline of a film reel. Then, beneath it, 2 letters, D and L by summer, the phenomenon reached mainstream news. Reporters called it the Dreamlight virus. They warned that watching the full 3-minute clip could induce seizures, hallucinations, or psychogenic feedback. But the warning only spread the legend further. People searched for it, downloaded it, filmed themselves watching it. Reaction videos flooded the internet. Some users vanished after posting their reactions. Their channels wiped clean except for a blank banner reading, "Signal received." Scientists tried to explain it as data corruption causing subliminal pattern recognition, a coincidence of algorithm and paranoia. But something strange happened inside the lab studying the clip. Cameras overheated, hard drives erased themselves, and once, during a live press demonstration, the image of the corridor appeared spontaneously on a projector that wasn't even connected to a computer. The technician presenting fainted. When he woke, he whispered, "He was behind me." As the hysteria grew, government agencies stopped commenting altogether. Servers hosting official archives of Cold War experiments went offline one by one. The National Archives database crashed permanently, wiping thousands of pages of declassified records. And yet, every 11 seconds, somewhere in the digital ether, the pulse continued. A ghostly echo of a reel that refused to stop spinning. Independent researchers found the hum appearing even in systems never connected to the internet. Analog radios, car speakers, even baby monitors. A journalist in Maine reported hearing it through a telephone line. 3 low beats, pause, 3 more, like a heartbeat coded in static. When she recorded the sound and slowed it down, it formed a recognizable phrase. A woman's voice, faint but clear. "He's still in my dream." No one could explain it. No one dared to play it twice. By late 2025, the phenomenon had subsided, at least publicly. The viral posts disappeared. Search engines returned no results for Dreamlight transmission. But some said that if you watched long enough, if you scrolled deep enough through the web's forgotten corners, the file would appear again. 3 minutes, black and white, no sound, only light. The same corridor, the same pulse, the same promise. Perhaps the experiment never ended. Perhaps it evolved. Dreamlight began with film, with the idea that a dream could be captured, measured, understood. But maybe the dream captured us instead. Every screen, every camera, every light sensor, all of them are lenses now, open and waiting. And somewhere behind them, the reel still turns. If you dream of him, don't look at the lens. Because once you do, he's no longer filming you. You're filming him,